There was once a man who had a brother who was inheriting money and land, and he wanted his brother to share those things with him. So he decided to go and see Jesus. He had heard of Jesus. He knew that Jesus was a good man and a good teacher. So one day, when Jesus was walking through a crowd, the man called out to Jesus and said, "Teacher, tell my brother to share his things with me." Jesus turned to the man and told him to be careful. He said, "There is more to life than having lots of things and money. Be careful not to be greedy." And then Jesus went on to tell this story. There was once a very rich man who owned a farm. His farm was on good land, so whenever the man planted seeds, the seeds grew well. And it meant that this man had lots and lots of crops, fine crops. He had so many crops that his barns were full and overflowing. Every year that the crops grew, the man had less and less space to put his crops in the barns. He couldn't fit everything in. This was a lovely problem to have for a farmer. So the man thought, "I know what I'll do. I know how I can solve this problem. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build even bigger ones. Then I'll have enough room for all of my crops." And that's what he did. He tore down all of his barns and had even bigger ones built, barn after barn after barn, just to hold all of the crops that his farm was producing. When the man had built all of the bigger barns and filled them up with all of his grain and corn and crops, he sat back. He thought, "I've got everything sorted. I'm sorted for years to come. Now I can take it easy. I can eat, I can drink, I can relax, I can chill. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to work. I can just sit back on what I have. I have so many crops, so much grain, so much corn. I have enough to carry me through the rest of my life. I can sell, I can eat it. I have got everything sorted." But that night, something incredibly sad happened. The man died. And of course, when the man died, the crops didn't really matter anymore. He couldn't keep his crops now that he was dead. His crops were left behind in these humongous barns that he'd built, but the man wasn't there anymore to enjoy them or to rely on them. There is an important lesson for us to learn from Jesus' story. Jesus turned back to the man who had called out to him from the crowd, and he said, "You know, if you focus on having things here in this life and money here in this life, but you are not right with God, you are a fool." And what Jesus was saying was, even though there's nothing wrong with having things in this life, there was nothing wrong with the farmer having crops, and there was nothing wrong with him building barns that were big enough to contain his crops, were his crops the most important thing? And the answer is, they shouldn't have been, should they? For this farmer, they were. He relied on them. He thought that it was going to make the rest of his life easy. He thought he had everything sorted because he had so many crops. But the truth is, he didn't have everything sorted. Having lots of things, possessions, money, land for this farmer, that is not the most important thing. And therefore, we shouldn't just focus on having things and money if we are not right with God. Being right with God is the most important thing. Because in the end of the story, the sad thing that happened was that the man died. And of course, when the man died, he couldn't keep his crops anymore. His crops were left behind. It would have been much better for the man to make sure that he was right with God. And if he was right with God, then everything truly would have been sorted for him. How can we be right with God? Well, we need to turn to him. We need to turn to him. We need to recognize that we have wrong in our lives that needs to be dealt with and needs to be forgiven. And if we turn to God and pray to him and ask him for that forgiveness, then God will ensure that things are right between us again. That is the most important thing, much more important than anything or any bit of money that we can have in this life. Are we right with God? Have we turned to Him to have the wrong in our lives forgiven and to have things put right between us?